Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2 a.m. tapes. Here we share chilling stories and mysteries that come alive when the world sleeps. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely. Because at 2 a.m., the tapes start to speak. I never found the dark web. It found me. It began after I moved into my new apartment, a cheap, silent building on the outskirts of the city, next to the river, where the fog never really lifted. The ad had said it was fully furnished and old-fashioned. They didn't mention it was barely ever occupied, or that every other floor seemed permanently vacant. It was apartment 2B, second floor, middle door. The hallway always felt colder than the rest of the building. You know, the kind of cold that doesn't bother your skin but somehow gets into your bones? That's the cold I felt from the first moment I turned the key. The first night was uneventful, apart from the silence. It was the kind of silence where you hear the blood rush through your ears. No neighbors, no pipes, just me in that still air. The second night, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was from the hallway, muffled, low, like someone whispering through a wet rag. I opened the door, expecting to catch someone passing by. The corridor was empty, as always, but the sound didn't stop. It took me a few minutes to realize the whispering wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the walls, not constant, sporadic, like a conversation paused, then resumed. When I pressed my ear against the wall, it always stopped. When I moved away, it resumed, so faint I couldn't even catch words, just tones, like someone speaking underwater. The air itself seemed to thicken when the whispers began, carrying with it a faint metallic tang I couldn't place. Sometimes, I swore I could feel a subtle vibration through the plaster, as if something immense was pressing against the other side. The landlord didn't care. Old wiring, old walls, he said. Buildings talk, ignore it. On the fourth night, I noticed the mirror. It had always been there, an antique, long one with tarnished edges, mounted to the wall between the kitchen and the living room. But I hadn't paid it much attention. That night, while walking past it, something felt wrong. My reflection was off by a second. I turned my head and my reflection turned, just a moment too late. I froze, backed up, rubbed my eyes, told myself it was my imagination. So I tested it. I raised my hand, waved. The reflection followed, but then it smiled. I didn't. My blood ran cold. I stepped away quickly, heart pounding. My mind raced. It must be stress, lack of sleep. The old mirror is just catching shadows, that's all. But the smile, brief as it was, lingered in my peripheral vision, a distorted echo of my own features, twisted into something predatory. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, as if something unseen was breathing on me from the mirror's surface. The mirror became a thing I avoided, but I couldn't avoid the dreams. They started the same each time. Me, standing in a hallway much like mine, but endlessly long. Every door was marked 2B. The lights flickered, casting long dancing shadows that stretched and retracted like living things. My footsteps echoed too loudly, as if I were in a metal chamber. And behind me, always just out of sight, came the soft padding of bare feet. The air in the dreams was heavy, thick with an unseen dust, and I could almost taste the metallic tang I'd noticed in the apartment. Sometimes, the flickering lights would reveal fleeting shapes at the very edges of my vision, just beyond what I could clearly discern. Not my own. I never turned around in the dreams. I always woke up drenched in sweat before I did. But the sounds in the apartment changed. The whispering grew clearer. Now it wasn't muffled. It spoke in fragments. See you. Again. Let it in. Sometimes it laughed, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement that seemed to come from all directions at once. And sometimes it repeated my name. Not shouted, just whispered, like it was trying to become part of my thoughts. I started hearing it even when I was at the grocery store or walking down the street. Always faint, always behind me. It was like a phantom vibration against my eardrums, a constant low thrum that I couldn't escape. It wasn't until the seventh night that I decided to leave. I packed quickly. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to explain. I didn't even want to be in that apartment long enough to think. But when I stepped into the hallway with my suitcase, something was off. There were more doors. Instead of the 5 doors per floor, I remembered. The hallway now stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with door after door. Each one had the number 2B. Some looked old and cracked, some looked brand new. Others were wrong. Twisted knobs, handles on the ceiling. One was entirely covered in what looked like black fur, the fur subtly rippling as if a hidden creature breathed within the door itself. One oozed a slow trickle of thick red liquid from underneath, the viscous fluid catching the dim light and glistening like fresh blood. The air in the hallway grew heavy, smelling of dust, decay, and something else. Something sickly sweet and metallic. I ran back to my door. It wasn't there. Where apartment 2B should have been was only a blank wall, seamless and impenetrable. My breathing grew shallow. I turned in every direction. The hallway didn't end. My phone had no signal. When I tried to scream, nothing came out. My throat felt constricted, as if a hand had closed around it. And then all the doorknobs started turning. Slowly. In unison. Hundreds of knobs, creaking, turning, squealing, the sound building into a cacophony that vibrated through the floor and up my legs. Something stepped out. It looked like me, but its skin was cracked, like dry paint. Its eyes were too wide, black, reflective like obsidian. It smiled that same smile from the mirror, a silent, stretching horror that seemed to go on forever. And then another stepped out, and another. A hallway full of versions of me, each more decayed, more broken, more inhuman. Some dragged themselves along the floor, their limbs twisted at impossible angles. One walked backward, its head lolling unnaturally. One crawled along the ceiling, its elongated fingers scrabbling at the plaster. All of them smiled, a silent chorus of mutilated grins that seemed to leach the warmth from the air. I ran. I don't remember how long. My legs ached, my lungs burned. The hallway never ended. I passed doors that breathed with shallow, ragged gasps, doors that screamed with thin, reedy wails that pierced my ears, doors that bled black liquid from the cracks, the viscous substance pooling on the floor and emitting a faint, acrid smoke. Eventually, I collapsed. When I woke, I was back in apartment 2B. Everything looked the same. My bags were unpacked, my clothes folded, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, full bars. It was like nothing had happened, except the mirror was gone. In its place was a blank wall, but the whispers were louder now. They came from everywhere, a constant low hum beneath the surface of my hearing, always just on the edge of comprehension. And sometimes I see them, reflections, not in mirrors, in windows, in screens, in the glossy surface of my phone, the cracked versions, the watchers. They never move, but I know they see me. Their black, empty eyes follow my every movement, even when I try to look away. I haven't left the apartment since. I don't know if I can. Sometimes I open the door. Sometimes I find a normal hallway, a blessed, terrifying normality. Other times, only doors, all marked 2B, and the air is thick and cold, filled with that sickeningly sweet metallic scent. And I hear footsteps approaching from behind, not one pair, but many, a shuffling, dragging symphony of unseen feet. One night I heard breathing, loud, raspy, inches behind my ear. I spun around. No one was there, but my breath fogged the air, and another fog drifted just beside it, one I didn't make, a sickly, cold mist that smelled faintly of damp earth and something rotten. Another night I turned on the faucet, and thick, black water came out. It smelled like rot and metal, and seemed to writhe faintly in the basin, as if alive. So I shut the door and pray. I don't sleep anymore. I wait for the next version of me to knock, the soft, deliberate rap echoing through the hollow apartment, or for the walls to whisper my name loud enough that I forget who I was,